the quiz number 3, and what I'm expecting and what I'm looking for, some common things that I saw, and some ways to make sure that you don't do the same thing on your final so that you get full points on this section of the final. The first thing you want to do is do a quick memorialization. I've done that, my who, my what, my where. Remember that mandatory, we want to know what that is, DC Circuit and SCOTUS. Many of you included the lower district court instead of just the appeals court and the Supreme Court. And we want just mandatory at this point. So make sure you're putting it into your memorialization so that you see it and it reminds you when you're using those filters to just use those mandatory ones. The next thing I want you to look at, there is a discrimination issue in here, but our main research question, I've highlighted, I would like you to research whether a grocery store chain can qualify under federal law as a meat packer. That is the question we're researching right now. We will probably go back and look at discrimination, but for this problem, we are just looking at that definition. So don't take the time to then look into discrimination. We are looking specifically at that definition. Then you're going to use that definition for your notes of decision, your citing references, your parallel table of authority. You're going to use that definition section versus any of the other sections that you've found. So again, my research question, in DC federal jurisdiction, does the definition of meat packer contain grocery stores under the US Code? And again, my familiarity is at 2. That helps me understand what tool I'm going to use. Am I going to use a secondary source to find what statute I'm looking for, or am I going to use the US Code Index based on the information that I have? And so a familiarity ranking can help you decide what you're going to do. The absolute easiest way to do this is look at the checklist, go through my list of questions and kind of say, okay, what do I have? So let's go ahead and look at that. My first question is, my first part of my statutes and regulations checklist is locate a statute. Do I know the name? Do I know the name of this meat packer's statute? At this point in time, I do not know the name. So I'm not going to look in the popular name table and I'm not going to look at Google. Those are the 2 ways I would look if I know the name. I'm going to go either to the US Code, a secondary source, look at case law, or browse the table of contents in the title. Right now, some of you said, oh, this is the Stockyard and Packers Act. And the thing is, ultimately, it ends up being part of that. But if we start there without actually knowing the name, this could be any amendment to it. It might not have anything to do with that. It just happens to be named the same thing. So without the actual name of the act, going to the popular name table is not the best start to this. Only when you actually know the name of the act should you start with that popular name table. Here, again, that US Code Index is going to be your best bet. We find the US Code Index on Westlaw. Remember to go into the US Code, select the index. And this will be when your keywords will be helpful. Meat packer, grocery store, those kinds of things. I'm going to start with meat packer because I don't really want the definition of grocery store. I want the definition of meat packer. Start with M. So I have meat packers, but I notice that packers is what is actually highlighted. I'll select packers. And then I can go through and it looks like I have a general section, 7 US Code section 181. That will get me generally to the idea of packers, and then I can look in the table of contents to try to find that. The other thing I have is something on definitions. So I have definitions in 182, 183, 191, and 196. It's probably where I'm going to start, or I'll start in 182, look at the table of contents, and jump around from there. I've selected the generally, and this chapter may be cited as the Packers and Stockyard Act of 1921. Now I have a popular name, but I already have where I am, so I don't need to go into that. But I do want to look at that table of contents, and as I look, I see definitions, one transaction named, but I also know that it continues on. since I've already looked at it. And when I've already looked through that index, so I know that it continues past 183. So I have Packer defined, and that sounds the best to me as far as answering the question that I have. So I'm going to go ahead and select Packer defined so that I can then read my statute. All right, so I have completed that. Do I know the name? No. US code, find it. My next step is to read the statute. I'm going to read the surrounding statutes for clarification on definitions and additional information. I'm going to read the notes of decision or notes to decision in an annotated database for case law that interprets the statute. So remember, these are the best cases that are on point. And then I'm going to read the citing references for all cases that cite the statute. When I'm finding all of the mandatory jurisdiction, make sure I then go into citing references. So I'm going to do step 2 now. So I look at 191, I read what the definition is. And again, I'm going to look at these facts and look at how they're defined within my own facts. Is my grocery store doing these things, buying livestock, marketing meat, food products, or livestock products? And then again, I can go to notes of decision. I'm going to look through either my table of contents, and I look and I see, oh look, supermarkets is number 8. Grocery store, supermarket, those are synonymous names. I can also just read through all of these and get to it. Here is supermarkets, nationwide supermarket chain, which operates centralized facilities, to which a significant part of the meat sold by them at a retail passed and was processed were with respect to the processing activities packers within this chapter and must submit annual reports required by packers for regulation under this chapter. Fantastic. Safeway Stores v. Freeman. So I have this case. I noticed that it is a DC appeals court case, 369 Federal 2nd 952. Some of you found Safeway under wholesalers, and you'll notice that this is the DC Circuit case. It's a federal sup case, right? We want the next one up to be mandatory, right? So we need to cite the 369 Federal 2nd 952. Likely some of the decision is in that district court opinion, but what we're looking for is that mandatory. So we want the 369 Federal 2nd 952. Okay, make sure you're looking at your citation. Make sure you know what your case is talking about. All right, so we have supermarkets. We have one good case, right? Safeway Stores v. Freeman. It is mandatory. It is within our jurisdiction, all of those things. However, we only have one case, right? We need to go to the next step because it says all mandatory authorities, right? So we need to check and see, are there other cases that cite 7 U.S. Code section 191? This is just one case, right? So we're going to go to citing references. There are 45 cases here. We'll select those cases. The first thing I'm going to do is filter for jurisdiction. So I want the U.S. Supreme Court, and then I want the DC court, right? So I should have 4 cases. Once I have these cases, I'm going to look through them and decide, are they talking about the definition of packers with regards to a grocery store that could be used for my fact pattern? I have Mahone, that's Safeway Stores that I already have, Giant Food, and Tag Brothers. So I have those 4 cases. Giant Food is the closest to being a good case, but again, if you read through the whole case, it's really not applicable to our facts. What I would expect to see in your exam would be, I checked citing references, I filtered for the Supreme Court and the Court of Appeals District of Columbia, and I read through these cases, Mahone, Giant Food, and Tag, and I didn't think that they were applicable. Or if you added them and then said not applicable, or Giant Food is okay but not great, something along those lines, all of those were acceptable answers. But you needed to do this step because you are looking for absolutely everything. Notes of decision is it on point? Citing references, everything. Now you're going to find other on-point cases you didn't hear, but over time you will find them in citing references, so make sure you don't forget that step. If I'm looking in Lexis, I would do a similar thing. I would look in my history and my notes to decision. I might search for supermarket or grocery store. And here I find nationwide supermarket chains. Here is that same Safeway case, 369 Federal 2nd 952. I'm going to then also check my citing decisions, same way. I'm going to then filter by court. I'm going to select multiple, U.S. Supreme Court, and then the Court of Appeals, because remember, the U.S. District Court is not mandatory. I'm going to select that, Mahone, Safeway, Giant Food. So we have our cases that we found in Westlaw. You did not have to do both of them, but if you were on Lexis, this is how I would do that step. So we have made it through part 2. The next one is to update the statute. Using Shepard's, better for subsections, or KeyCite, make sure your statute is up to date. Many of you lost points by not updating the statute, or at least saying, hey, it doesn't have a flag, it doesn't have this, I updated it. It is important that you take that step. So if I'm looking at the document, I see here there are no flags, no pending legislation. Shepard's, same thing, I can Shepardize the document, no flags, no subsections to it. It's just one part. So making mention of that, make sure you are updating. The next one, do I need to look at older versions of the statute to understand changes that occurred? We are not dealing with that from the statute, from the language in the prompt. If it were, hey, this change seems to have happened in 1985, what did the language say before that? That is when I would then look at that history. The next step, and several of you just forgot to look for regulations and lost many points because you didn't look for regulations. This is always part of your statute work. Anytime you have a statute, you're at least going to check to see if there's a regulation. If there is, it will help deepen your understanding of what is necessary for your client to do. And so we are going to do that. Are there clues that there might be a regulation? A regulation is listed in Westlaw or Lexis. A lot of you did that. That was a fantastic way to see and also say, hey, look, there's one regulation under citing references. It is 9 CFR 201.302. Fantastic. You can do that. When there's only one, that's a really easy way to jump in. I'm still going to try the parallel table of authorities to see if there's something else listed. Maybe Westlaw and Lexis don't have them listed, but that's what I would do. In Lexis, you're going to go to other citing sources and then look at regulations. And again, 9 CFR 201.302. So that is your first step to knowing, hey, I think there's a regulation. The next thing I'm going to do is look at that parallel table of authorities. So here is the parallel table of authorities on govinfo.gov. I'm going to look up 7 U.S. Code 191. What I find is there isn't a specific 191. However, 181 through 229C encompasses 191. So I'm going to go ahead and say 9 CFR Part 201 is the one that corresponds to it. Some of you went further down 182 and found 203 or 206, but these are not specific to that 191 definition section that we're looking for. So we're really looking for 9 CFR Part 201. From there, I'm going to go back to Westlaw or Lexis, type in 9 CFR 201, and this will give me the entire list and table of contents. So here is 9 CFR Part 201, and I can look through all 78 of these. 78 is a lot, right? And you can even change, some of you might have it 20 per page. If you want all of them, you can come down to the very bottom and say, I want 100 per page or whatever it is. The best and easiest way to look through this, since I'm looking for definitions, would probably be to Command F, Control F for the word definition. And I find there are 3 of them. And I would read through each one of those and see what that has to do. It ends up that 201.302 has to do with 191. So it talks specifically about 7 U.S. Code 191, definition of packer, or a packer as defined in Section 201 of the Act. So we know if we fall under 7 U.S. Code 191, we also fall under these rules within 201.302. So it's not much. It's not saying a lot, but that is what I'm looking for. Some of you went further and looked at the source, kind of all of that. There was not in any indication that that was where the research would want you to go. But if I needed to see what it looked like, who commented on it, everything, again, I'm looking at the source. This is the original one. You know, I can look at changes or amendments that happened. And then I can also see, hey, here's that authority that I saw in the parallel table of authorities. So that was really the last step. We can go back to our last steps. Not starting from a statute. I was starting from a statute. I read the regulation. Do I need background information? No, just read the regulation as above. Make sure your regulation is up to date using ecfr.gov. Many of you did that, but remember, Westlaw and Lexis are also up to date as of a couple of days. And so I can look here and see that the last change was made in 2024 and that it's current through March 27th, 2026. So I am good as far as there not being any changes to 201.302. So I can do that quickly and see that. Or I could type in 201.302 into ECFR and see that no changes have been made. Either of those finish off that last step. So really going through each check, getting all of those details out will then give me a full answer to here. If you have questions about any of these steps or about your specific grade or the comments that I made, please feel free to come and talk to me. Wednesdays at noon, I'm always in my office, but also you can find me on the reference desk on Tuesdays or on Fridays. And please come and talk to me and we can talk through any issues or problems that you had as you worked through this.